In one of the ancient times, there was a judge named Zahrān who became famous for his intelligence, cunning, and wisdom in restoring rights to their rightful owners and removing injustice from the oppressed. Judge Zahrān managed to solve 3 of the most difficult cases he had ever faced. The first case. It is said that there were 2 neighbors. One was kind-hearted and the other was cunning. The kind neighbor lived beside the cunning one without realizing his neighbor's deceitful nature. One day, the cunning neighbor found himself in dire need, with no food left in his house. He went to his kind neighbor's home to ask for a loan, but didn't find him. However, the kind neighbor's wife told him that her husband had gone to work early in the morning and hadn't returned yet. The cunning man decided to go to his neighbor's workplace. On his way, he saw his neighbor returning home and stopped him. He explained his situation and asked for a loan of 1,000 dirhams. Without hesitation, the kind neighbor agreed to lend him the money. Nearby, there was a palm tree, so the kind neighbor said, "Tomorrow, God willing, I will prepare the 1,000 dirhams and meet you here by this palm tree." The next day, the cunning neighbor went to the agreed spot and found his kind neighbor waiting for him as promised. The kind neighbor handed over the 1,000 dirhams. The cunning neighbor then said, "I will repay you this money after 3 months." The kind neighbor agreed, trusting him completely and not asking for any written proof. After 3 months, the kind neighbor went to his cunning neighbor to reclaim the 1,000 dirhams, but the cunning man denied ever receiving the money. Heartbroken, the kind neighbor thought to himself, "We have reached a time when good deeds are repaid with evil." But having heard about Judge Zahrān's sharp mind and fairness, the kind neighbor decided to seek justice. When he stood before Judge Zahrān and recounted what had happened, the judge summoned the cunning neighbor. When the cunning man arrived, the judge asked him, "Is it true that your neighbor lent you 1,000 dirhams?" The cunning neighbor denied it, saying, "I never borrowed anything from him." The judge turned to the kind neighbor and asked, "Do you have any witnesses or documents to prove your claim?" The kind neighbor replied, "No, Your Honor, but I trusted him and never imagined he would deny my right." Judge Zahrān sensed the truth in the kind neighbor's words. After a moment of thought, he instructed him, "If you're truthful and really lent him the money, go fetch a handful of soil from the place where you gave him the money." The kind neighbor was puzzled, but hurried off to do as instructed. As time passed and the kind neighbor did not return, Judge Zahrān turned to the cunning man and asked, "Your neighbor has been gone for quite some time. Do you know why he hasn't come back yet?" Without thinking, the cunning neighbor blurted out, "That place is far away." At that moment, Judge Zahrān smiled and declared, "Now you've proven the truth of your neighbor's claim. If his story were false, you wouldn't have known how far the location was. That is indeed the same place where you took the money." With this clever reasoning, Judge Zahrān confirmed the kind neighbor's honesty and ordered the cunning man to be imprisoned until he returned the stolen money. The second case. An old man rode his donkey to the market to buy a sack of flour. Once at the market, he purchased a heavy sack of flour. A strong young man helped him lift the sack onto the donkey's back. The old man mounted the donkey with the sack of flour in front of him and began his journey home. On the way, the donkey stumbled, causing the sack of flour to fall to the ground. The old man couldn't lift it back onto the donkey by himself. As he struggled, a young man, though physically strong, passed by. This young man, however, was rude and foolish. He approached the old man and asked, "What's keeping you here?" "Old man," the old man explained, "I went to the market to buy a sack of flour, but my donkey tripped and the sack fell. I can't lift it back onto the donkey." The young man said, "I can lift the sack for you, but what will you give me in return?" The old man replied, "Nothing." The young man lifted the sack and placed it on the donkey's back. Then, as the old man prepared to leave, the young man stopped him and said, "Where are you going?" "To my house," the old man answered. "And what about the nothing you promised me?" the young man demanded. Confused, the old man asked, "What do you mean? I told you I have nothing to give." Insistently, the rude young man said, "You promised me nothing, and now you must give it to me." Realizing the absurdity of the situation, the old man decided to take the matter to Judge Zahrān. When they both appeared before the judge, the old man recounted the story. Judge Zahrān listened carefully and turned to the old man, asking, "Did you promise this young man nothing in exchange for lifting the sack?" "Yes, Your Honor," the old man replied. Turning to the young man, the judge asked, "And you want the nothing he promised you?" "Yes, Your Honor," the young man responded. Judge Zahrān, recognizing the young man's foolishness, ordered a guard to bring the donkey carrying the sack of flour into the courtroom. Everyone was surprised, unsure of what the judge intended to do. Once the donkey was brought in, Judge Zahrān challenged the young man, saying, "If you truly want what you were promised, take the sack off the donkey's back and place it on the ground." The young man obeyed and removed the sack. Then the judge commanded, "Now put it back on the donkey's back." Again, the young man complied. Finally, the judge asked, "What did you find under the sack when you picked it up?" "Nothing," the young man admitted. Judge Zahrān laughed and said, "Well then, take it. That's exactly what the old man promised you." With this witty response, Judge Zahrān taught the rude young man a lesson. The third case. A man had 3 sons, all named Zaid. Before he died, he wrote a will stating, "Zaid inherits, and Zaid does not inherit." When the sons read the will, they were confused because they shared the same name. Unsure of whom their father meant to disinherit, they sought Judge Zahrān's help. When the brothers presented the case to the judge, he suspected that one of them might not actually be the man's biological son. To confirm his suspicion, Judge Zahrān devised a plan. He ordered the guard to bring the brothers into the courtroom one by one. To each brother, the judge posed the same question. "We've considered exhuming your father's body to compare fingerprints, as the will may be forged. Do you agree to this?" The first Zaid refused angrily, saying, "Absolutely not. I won't allow my father's body to be disturbed, even if it means giving up my inheritance." The second Zaid reacted similarly, also refusing and renouncing his share of the inheritance. However, the third Zaid casually agreed, saying, "If you must exhume him, so be it. Life goes on." Upon hearing this response, Judge Zahrān concluded that the third Zaid was the one mentioned in the will. A true son would never consent to disturbing his father's grave for material gain. Thus, the judge identified the impostor and resolved the case. In the end, Judge Zahrān became renowned for his brilliance and wisdom. People learned that a wise judge could always distinguish between the oppressor and the oppressed, ensuring justice prevailed. Which of these cases impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments.